not with us this morning. She's can't talk. Other than that, she, I think, is okay, but that's a little hard to teach when you can't talk. So I'll be doing part one and part two this morning, and this is also our last class in this series, and I'll say a little bit more at the end of it about what we do have a plan for after the first of the year, so we'll talk about that. But I guess because of either it just happened this way or it might have been wonderful planning, I don't know, but we end this class with the last words of the New Testament. So that is, if I can get there in the time that we have. Last time we were talking about apocalyptic, and last time we were talking about apocalyptic in the Old Testament, and this time in the New Testament. Of course, we have this book, the Apocalypse, we call the book of Revelation, or unfortunately here people calling it the book of Revelations. Not right, okay? I hear people on TV who often who think they're qualified to criticize the Bible, saying, well, it says over there in the book of Revelations, and I think you're not yet qualified to be criticizing the Bible if you don't know that that's not the name of that book. Revelations is one whole thing, but the word revelation comes from the translation of that word apocalypse. And if you look at traditionally, that book has been called in Bibles and other languages the Apocalypse. For some reason in English, we got the word revelation stuck to it. And we will look a little bit at the 20th chapter, which is the one that raises so much controversy. But don't get your expectations up about this brilliant explanation for Revelation 20. But we do want to talk about it in a context of how to read apocalyptic literature. But before I do that, I mentioned last time, I guess this really deals with the larger question of biblical reading in general. The whole question about, I'll hear, this is another thing I hear often in the media, they'll say, so-and-so takes the Bible literally. This is usually said as a slam, that somebody takes the Bible literally. And now I don't want to be quoted out of context on this. I probably shouldn't say something that's going out on the internet to say this, but that often there are large sections of the Bible that you're not supposed to take literally. That's one of the reasons we've done this class, to talk about the poetry you don't take literally, for example. And so it's misstating the issue to say, well, do you believe that the Bible literally, or do you believe it figuratively? Well, you can believe the Bible and understand that large sections of it must be understood figuratively in order to understand what they're really saying. What you want from any literary work or speech or anything you hear is what is the speaker, the communicator, trying to communicate? And it's trying to get that right, and not arguing about whether this is literally true or not. Huge portions of the Bible, particularly the narrative portions, are literally true. Large sections of the Bible, you can't even understand what they're talking about if you try to read them literally, okay? And one of the ways to kind of illustrate that, and I want to take a few minutes, it'd be fun for us to do, because this is kind of fun. Numbers, I mentioned this not the book of Numbers, but number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Numbers. You always must be careful when you're reading the Bible and you come to a number that you're not reading, that you don't read it as arithmetic. 2 plus 2 is 4. Now, those numbers are, I guess you'd say, being taken literally. But even in our speech, we use a number of numbers in figurative ways. And I want to just take a few minutes. I'd love for us to do this a lot, but there are about 4 or 5 numbers that are particularly biblical numbers that are not tied to arithmetic, at least not most of the time. I want to mention a number, and then very quickly, if you could tell me somewhere in the Bible where there's this number, okay?
It's an odd number, right?
Well, here, first number I'm thinking about is, I've got, I think 4 or 5. The first number I'm thinking about is 40.
The years in the wilderness.
Days of rain.
The years in the wilderness, 40 years in the wilderness.
40 days of rain.
40 days and nights in the Noah story of the flood.
40 days of fasting.
Jesus fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Those are we got the easy ones. They get harder after that, but there are a lot of them. Actually, the number 40 appears over 100 times in the Bible. And I had the advantage of having done this ahead of time, and I wrote these down. Isaac marries Rebekah when he's 40. Esau marries, Esau is 40 when he marries. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years. Moses stayed on the mountain, Sinai, 40 days and 40 nights. The Israelite spies went into Canaan. They stayed 40 days. We mentioned Israel was in the desert 40 years. Israel was under the Philistines for 40 years. Eli, the judge, led Israel for 40 years. David reigned for 40 years. Solomon reigned for 40 years. Joash reigned for 40 years. You begin to get the picture here? You're beginning to think 40 must not necessarily mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 40. It's a way of expressing something. And I'd love for us to stop and have a nice discussion about what we think they stand for, but I just got to move on. Sorry about that. I will just say that I personally think that 40 simply means a lifespan, a career. It's not saying the numbers on the calendar. It just, if somebody does something for 40 years, it means they did that all their life. That was their job. They did it. So if you retired after 44 years at Pepperdine, the Bible might just say you were here for 40 years because it's not counting the years specifically. Oh, by the way, and when Jesus, between the resurrection and the ascension, how many days did Jesus stay on the earth?
40.
Good guess, right? 40 days. So 40, 40, 40 all along. Okay, now the number 7. 500 times in the Bible you have the number 7. It's everywhere. Name me a few 7s.
Forgiveness. How many times you forgive?
You forgive somebody, fact, 7 times 70. It's a bunch of 7s, right? Okay, what's another one?
Creation.
Creation, 7 days. Anybody else got one? A lot of times it'll appear as 70, but it's the same idea. In fact, often a symbolic number stands for something, and then if you multiply by 10 or by 100, that means it really stands for that. It's a way of increasing the power of it. Okay, so Jacob worked 7 years for each of his wives. Remember that story?
Yeah.
When the Israelites went down into Egypt, how many of them were there? There were 70 of them. Pharaoh's dream that Joseph helped him understand had 7 cows, and things happened for 7 years. The Sabbath itself is the 7th day. In the ceremonial law, like in Leviticus and so on, there's 7s everywhere. You're supposed to do 7, or it's supposed to be 7 cubits long, or that kind of thing. Israel had 70 elders. Israel was in captivity for 70 years. So here again, you just had this constant. Then you get into the New Testament, and how many loaves were there that Jesus fed the 5,000 with?
5 loaves and 2 fishes.
5 loaves and 2 fishes, which adds up to 7. And how many baskets full were they left over when they? 7 baskets full. The forgiveness, Peter says, should I forgive 7 times? Jesus says 7 times 70. See what I mean about taking the number and really making it powerful. How many demons did Mary Magdalene have?
I'm gonna guess 7.
Yeah, I'm really asking these questions in a very handy way here. The early church in Jerusalem, when they decided to select demons, how many did they? I did not. That's Mary Magdalene's. Deacons. How many of them were there? 7. Let's see. Okay. In the book of Revelation, in the Apocalypse, how many churches is it written to? 7. And then there are sevens all over the book of Revelation. We could just spend the rest of the time talking about the sevens there. There's a famous passage in Daniel that people for centuries think is Daniel predicting either when the Messiah was going to come or when the end of the world was going to come. And they take a number there and try to put it onto a calendar and then figure out when they think the world is going to end, or that sort of thing, or when the Messiah is going to come. And it's Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 and 25. It says this: no one understands this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be, and if you read your Bible, it probably says there will be 490 weeks or something like that. And people have been trying to figure out, how much does that mean? Is a week a year, or is a week 7 years, or, and working on that and working on that. And what it actually says in the original, it says there will be 7 sevens, and later it says there will be 62 sevens. It doesn't say weeks, it says sevens. So again, we're dealing with 7 as a concept. It'd take way too long for us to talk about 7 as a concept, so I'm just gonna move on here. But there is some, often we say that 7 represents perfection, or that's all there is to it. That's completeness. And that's probably the best way to summarize that. Now, okay, now the number 12. There are not as many of them, but they're very important. Give me a couple of 12s.
Apostles.
12 apostles.
Tribes.
12 tribes of it. That's probably all you need to know. Though there are some other.
Days of Christmas.
12 days of Christmas. And by the way, that's somebody thought that up who understood the importance of 12ness. When in the early church, they say the first thing they do is the first order of business. Hey, we only have 11 apostles. We got to get another one because the church can't start unless you have 12. The people of God, the way to say the people of God is to say the 12. Just like the way you said the people of Israel was to say the 12 tribes, or the 12 sons of Jacob. So there's how many gates are there in the heavenly Jerusalem? 12 gates are made out of pearls and things, right? Pearly gates. So 12 is a number that to which adheres this idea of the people of God. They are a 12ness, probably coming from the idea that there were the 12 tribes. Okay, one more. The number 1,000. 250 times in the Bible, you have the number 1,000 or some multiple of it. Remember that the multiples often, if there's anything about Hebrew, when you want to say, help me English people, you say good, better, best. So you have good, and then better, is that the comparative, and then the superlative? Is that right in grammar? The way you do that often in Hebrew is you just say the word 2 times to be the comparative, and 3 times be the superlative. That's why the way we say holy, holy, holy. That's the Hebrew way of saying as holy as you can possibly get. So anyway, so when you have the multiples of 1,000, this is what's being said. I won't take us through the little thing again, other than just say you have statements like this in Deuteronomy 7. It says that God is going to keep his covenant of love for 1,000 generations. Does that mean at 1,001 he doesn't do it anymore? No, because we're not dealing with arithmetic here or with chronology. Deuteronomy chapter 1, the Lord will increase, this is a benediction. May the Lord, the God of your ancestors, increase you 1,000 times. And all through the Bible, armies are numbered in thousands, so many thousands. And casualties from wars are numbered in thousands, so many thousands. And then you had this parade when David is being made the king of Israel, and they're shouting from the sidelines. This is in 1 Samuel. Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. And then when Solomon is acknowledged to be the king, and the ceremonies they have before that, it says they give sacrifices, and they sacrifice 1,000 bulls, 1,000 rams, and 1,000 male lambs. Thousand. Something is big and important and significant when it's 1,000. And there are these lovely things in the Psalms where, for example, in Psalm 50, every animal of the forest is mine, and the cattle on 1,000 hills. Let's see, Psalm 84, better one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. And Psalm 90, this one's also quoted in the New Testament in 1 Peter. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by. How many people did Jesus feed out there with the loaves and fishes?
5,000.
Depending on, there are 2 times, one of them, but they're both numbered in thousands. How many people were baptized on the day of Pentecost? 3,000. You begin to see this 1,000 pattern. And so when you get to the book of Revelation, to the Apocalypse, for some reason, knowing everything that we just have gone through here, people want to take the number 1,000 in the book of Revelation and make it into arithmetic. When we're already beginning to see the pattern, the way the New Testament uses these. In Revelation 5, it says, John says, I looked and I heard the voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000s upon 10,000. Okay. And they encircled the throne and the living elders and so on. So you can see this word is being used in Revelation in this apocalyptic, symbolic kind of way. And incidentally, again, I've tried to get a more sophisticated explanation of this for years, but I haven't been able to come up with anything other than just that it means a whole bunch. That's basically the meaning of the number 1,000 in the Bible. It means a lot. And if you double it, that means a lot of a lot. And if you make it up to 10 times, it just means a sort of innumerable host, 10,000s of 10,000. So I just, I say all this, not to say that every number in the Bible is to be taken figuratively. There are some that would be taken very literally. And sometimes they're a combination. I think there really were 12 apostles. But that's not an arbitrary number. There are 12 apostles because of what apostles are and what they stand for. So the 12 apostles are both literal and figurative, as were the 12 tribes. And that's just an important kind of hint in reading a biblical text to deal with those. And frankly, we don't always know what the number means. These that I've mentioned are easier because they're many times in the Bible, and you begin to get the patterns and you can understand them. There's some others that are harder. Yes.
Yeah, there's a number that is not too much large. I think just maybe about I'm mistaken 3 times. It's like Jesus was 30 years old when he started his ministry. David was 30 years old when he became king of Israel.
Right.
Joseph was 30 years old when he became prime minister in Israel.
Yeah. Yeah, you get some of those other too, and I'm thinking also about, of course,
others king too were also 30 years old when they became king, and so on and so on.
right. And even the 3, I mean, the whole thing about threes is another interesting one. And we have the Trinity and so on, and then these multiples of 3. So now don't go too far. Don't get cute with this. Okay. I see people that try to kind of turn the Bible into a sort of secret book of numerology or something like that. These are not meant, I want to stress again that symbols in the Bible are not meant to confuse you or to hide a secret. They were meant to teach. They were written in a context where the people reading them would know how to interpret these. We're 2,000 years or more later, and we have to, we have to get a little preparation in order to know what they often knew because they just heard this done all their lives. Well, I want to turn to Revelation 20 for a little while. We're not going to go verse by verse in this or try to explain what all of these things mean in Revelation 20. You've got to really have the whole context, and I know I taught a class in Revelation. Steve Davis, who's with us this morning, taught one. We've done that, and I don't want to just go back over that again. But just taking all the things that we've talked about apocalyptic and the numbers today, but particularly the characteristics of apocalyptic literature, they kind of all get pulled together in this chapter. And so let's kind of look at it from that point of view, reading this, realizing that we're reading apocalyptic. What do we see? Let me just, I won't go through this whole list again, but remember some of the things about apocalyptic. You have some individual on the earth is visited by someone from the other world. And again, I want to give you my, the little thing is very helpful to me when I'm reading the book of Revelation. I'm imagining that I'm either in a big theater with a huge wraparound screen, or I just go out at night in the night sky, and the whole sky becomes a screen on which I'm watching a big science fiction movie. Many $million budget, okay? The sky's the limit. And you see all these things, you observe all these things happening. And what you basically are observing is the sort of the story that goes something like this. There is a cosmic battle between good and evil. It's going on all over the universe and all over anything else that exists. There's this clash between good and evil. But we are only in a tiny corner of this. But we must interpret what's going on in our world as being part of this gigantic cosmic battle between good and evil. And it'll help us to understand some things. Because in any battle, the bad guys are often concentrated in one spot, and the people who are having to face them there think that they're losing. If you're on a defense line and the enemy is coming over and they've decided, now let's concentrate our power at point A, and you happen to be one of the defenders of point A, and you're outnumbered 50-1, you think, we're going to lose this thing. We're 50-1, they've got all the bombs and the guns and everything. What you don't realize is the big picture, where the general is back there looking at the chart, and he says, well, the line may break right there, but we've got the rest of it. Victory is ours. And you think, no, victory isn't ours. I'm facing 100-1 odds. Well, this is very much what the writer of Revelation is doing for Christians who are being persecuted. The other thing about apocalyptic is it's written to people who have a specific problem. It's not written to give all the secrets of what's going to happen in the future. It does talk about something that's going to happen in the future because it wants to assure you that as bad as things are right now, they're going to get better. And as bad as injustice seems in our world, good is going to overcome evil, and injustice is going to be righted. The books are going to be balanced. And literally, at the end of Revelation, as we'll see, the book is opened, and then it's balanced. Okay, everything comes out right. The hardest thing for us, we talk a lot about justice in the current generation. Justice is a very hard word to define. Very hard. And it's not that the Bible ever says, and here's what justice is, but what the Bible says over and over again, and Apocalyptic says it a lot, is, but justice will be done. It's hard to see that in the world we live in, but that's what Apocalyptic says. Yes, but you're just you literally cannot see the big picture. So we'll see how that develops here. Unfortunately, thousands of pages have been written over hundreds of years, not about that wonderful idea and comfort, but about what's this 1,000 years thing? And when's that going to happen? And when's it going to start? And who are these 144,000? We land on these numbers, which I've tried to point out to you. Try to see what the number is saying, not how many digits there are in it. Okay. But we overlook that and have all kinds of arguments about the 1,000 years. And have they started yet? Or when they start, well, what'll happen, And I hear people that they don't, well, it's Russia and it's China and it's, And in just 7 years from now, this battle is going to take place and somebody's going to overrun Israel. And I hear all of these kinds of things and I try to treat everybody's ideas with respect, but I just think, hey, you're barking up the wrong tree, as we used to say in the Ozarks. You're not understanding what's meant to be communicated here. So Revelation 20. And that's John, the person who's getting the revelation, who's seen the picture. The curtain is being drawn back and he's seeing the picture. I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the abyss and holding in his hand a great chain. So here's the set, here's what, if it were in a theater, this is what they painted and put on the set. There's the abyss, this deep, dark abyss. There's this angel who has the key to open it up. Kind of reminds you of a sort of Frankenstein kind of thing. There's the dungeon, and the key to the dungeon and the great chain. And he seized the dragon. There are a whole series of creatures in Apocalyptic that represent the power of the devil, of evil. Remember, it's a battle between good and evil. And so there's the dragon, that ancient serpent who is the devil or Satan. So in case you didn't catch the first symbol, the author gives you 4 or 5 to say, here's what I'm talking about. The personification of evil, the prince of darkness, the one who leads the forces of evil. But the angel seizes him. He's got a chain and he binds him for 1,000 years. And he threw him into the abyss and locked and sealed it over him to keep him from deceiving the nations anymore until the 1,000 years were over. And after that, he will be released for a short time. We could talk a long time about all the theories that people have who are trying to put this on a calendar. My own feeling is we're reading Apocalyptic and you shouldn't put it on a calendar. Use your imagination, understand what John is saying. So deep in the pit, the angel of God has bound the dragon. And I saw thrones on which were seated those who had been given the authority to judge. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony about Jesus and because of the word of God. See, he has seen the injustice. These poor people, all they were trying to do was, serve God as they understood. And of course, the book of Revelation, there's some discussion about the exact historical situation. Some say it was under Nero, and some say it may have been under the Emperor Domitian, but it was, whatever the precise time was, it was this time of terrible persecution where Christians were being tortured and killed for nothing more than they believed in Jesus. That was their only crime. It's terrible injustice. And in this vision that John is seeing, he sees those people who were treated that way. And by the way, the people who were reading this book had probably seen that happen. They'd seen some of those beheadings. They may have had family members. And they had the power of the Roman Empire against them. Just think about that. By this time, the Roman Empire was ruling the world, at least the western half of the world. And they're this tiny little group of Christians trying to, serve God and look forward to the kingdom. And so they're reading all of this in this context. And he says, I saw the angel come down and put the devil down into the abyss. And then I saw those people who had been beheaded for their testimony. I saw their souls. They had not worshiped the beast or its image and had not received its mark on their forehead or their hands. Again, tempted to talk about all these things, because we still use the phrase, the mark of the beast. Somebody who has they have accepted the mark of the beast. They've, and put it in old time gang terms, they've ratted out. And it doesn't seem right that they're living a nice life, and the people who stood up for their faith, they've been beheaded. So John in this vision sees all of these, both of these. And then the others, the ones who were beheaded and so on, they came to life and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. When I ever see this phrase, they came to life, reminds me of that, of the passage in the Old Testament. Anybody know what I'm talking about coming to life?
Bones.
Yeah, them bones, them dry bones. Remember the old spiritual. Is it Ezekiel? I can't remember which one. Yeah, Ezekiel. In this case, it's Israel, and they're just like dry bones lying on and he sees them. This again is a beautiful apocalyptic imagery. He sees the bones and they're coming together in the form of skeletons, and then the flesh comes on and they live again. And the author of Revelation, who often draws his symbolism from things in the Old Testament, and particularly from apocalyptic pictures that are given in the Old Testament, he sees them coming to life, and they reign with Christ 1,000 years. The idea here is he calls this the first resurrection. This is not the, here I am. I said I wasn't going to do this, but I just can't avoid explaining a little bit more about this. This is the first resurrection. This is the resurrection of justice. This is saying, what I saw in my vision is that that these people may look like bleached bones lying in the desert. They may, I may just be seeing the souls of people who were being beheaded. But they're the ones, when the devil is put in the abyss, they're the ones who are going to reign. The last shall be first, and the first shall be last, as Jesus put it. And now the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. That's something else. That's another issue. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy are those who share the first resurrection. The second death has no power over them, but they will be priests of God and of Christ and will reign with him for 1,000 years. This is the assurance that these people who have been treated with such injustice and cruelty by this massive power of evil. And in the book of Revelation, there's not much difference between the Roman government and the dragon. It's pretty anti-government. I often point out that it's very interesting. In the New Testament, you have Paul and Peter saying, respect your leaders, honor the sovereign. Jesus says, whoever's in charge, you obey their laws. And then you have the book of Revelation saying, but sometimes they are the devil itself. And we're caught in between those two ideas about how we relate to government. So then, verse 7, when the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog. And boy, oh boy, this just invites people to try to figure out who Gog is and who Magog is. I was in Cambridge for a while. There's a big hill right kind of downtown in Cambridge. It's the hill of Gog and Magog. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And to gather them for battle. What he's coming to is the next scene in this movie is the battle. And in number, they are like the sand of the seashore. That's the bad guys. And they march across the breadth of the earth and surround the camp of God's people, the city he loves. That's his people. That's the church. That's the believers, the persecuted believers. But fire came down from heaven and devoured them. Perfect apocalyptic. They're being rescued by a supernatural power and devours the enemy. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of burning sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet had been thrown. And they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. So this bad place is designed, this is the apocalyptic way of saying, yes, there's evil in the universe. And from your perspective, the universe looks like it's being ruled by evil. The bad guys are winning. But then in this very vivid kind of, again, science fiction kind of way, he says, but what I saw in the vision I was given, the heavenly vision that I saw, is there's this boiling cauldron, and all of those forces of evil that have done bad things to good people and have fought against the forces of good through all of history, and maybe even before history, who how do we know they're all thrown into the burning cauldron. And then it says in verse 11, I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on. So now we have another vision. Again, think in terms of a movie. So we're moving into the next scene. Okay. And there is this great white throne and him who is seated on it. And the earth and the heavens fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. We're not talking about the creation now. We're talking about wherever that other place is. Because the scriptures not only picture human beings as being, on the earth, but they had this same kind of awe of the heavens, and we would say today the universe, and then the question of beyond the universe, and the supposition biblical writers take, not just apocalyptic writers take, is that the universe. I hear this being argued now in scientific areas. Is there an edge to the universe, and if so, what's on the other side of it? The Big Bang theory. Where was the Big Bang located? Where was the thing located that went bang? So could you get to the end of the universe and then there's something on the other side? Well, I don't know that the Bible describes this spatially like that, like a physicist would, but it does imply that our world is not the only world. But it does it in an apocalyptic context. So you can't get, don't think you're reading a scientific explanation of of how the universe is put together. But wherever this great white throne is, that's not any place just kind of up in the sky a few hundred or 1,000 miles, because it says the earth and the heavens, they're moved out. We're talking about someplace else. He sees this. And they flee from his presence. There's no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. I've thought a lot about that. If you study a lot of history, you realize how many dead people there are. And where are they? I mean, physically, where are they? We don't last long, even though we sort of try to slow the process down. But when they say from dust you came, into dust you shall return, that's pretty much it. I don't want to take too much time with this, but I was, studying my family tree, and I found some ancestors who moved into the Louisville, Kentucky area back in the 1700s. They came with, was it Daniel? But who went off to Kentucky anyway? They were with him, and that family stayed there long time. They still live. Some of them still live there. Well, they found the old family cemetery, and they wanted to build a new housing place. So they came to the family. They said, "We'd like to move the cemetery, and we'll treat the graves with great respect, but we want to move the graves to another place." And I went out. I read the story, and I actually found they went out in the country, the little country church, and they have these graves of all of these of my ancestors lined up there with the names on them where they were reburied. But I went back and read some newspaper stories, and they said when they went down to find the remains, that in most cases there was nothing. There was nothing. These are people from the early 1800s, basically, who died in the early 1800s. They knew the spot. So they just took some of the soil from the spot and put them in a box and went through the ceremony of reburying them. Think of all the people who are in the sea. In fact, the Bible uses the phrase, the sea gave up its dead. I'm sure ancient people thought about that same thing. Think of all of the people who have lived through all of history. And in this apocalyptic vision that John has seen, he sees them all. There they are, this huge, mighty, because, you know, it's not all about us, okay? That's why, another thing I like about history, it tells us, history is not all about us. We represent a fairly small, narrow bit of it. John has seen the whole thing. I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Here comes the justice. See? Another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. So this story, by the way, was not told to scare anybody. The only person that needs to be scared by apocalyptic writing is the devil. That lake of fire thing, that's pretty intimidating, you know. But this story, this vision, this apocalypse is given as comfort, not to scare anybody. And so when you read about the lake of fires and about people being thrown in the lake of fire, and so I know there are people who some of you may know the name Jimmy Allen. I knew him. He was a very well-known evangelist and preacher in the Churches of Christ just a few years ago. And Jimmy Allen had a sermon on hell. I never heard it personally, but I've read it. And they say that if you heard Jimmy Allen preach that sermon, you thought he must have been there at one time. He had so many details that weren't anywhere in the Bible, but Jimmy, he could really put them out there and scare you to death, you know. But this story is not told to scare the believers. It's told to say, no. The books, that is, these things are not forgotten. And the deeds are remembered, but the deeds are remembered, by the way, by Christians in the context of the forgiveness of God and the grace of God and the justice of God. So justice will be done at the end, with the exception of the forgiveness that comes by grace through faith. Okay. And getting more specific than that, to me, is getting more specific than the Bible does. But anyway, it says that the sea gave up the dead that were in it. That's in verse 13. And death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them. That's all the people who are no longer living on the earth. And each person was judged according to what they had done. And then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. That whole system of living and dying disappears. And the lake of fire is the second death. And anyone whose name was not written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. The wrongs are finally righted, you see. That's the point. It's not to scare. It's to answer that old question, why? Why do things happen, bad things happen to good people? And good things happen to bad people. You know, why does that happen? And so the righteous cross the sea and they enter into the new Jerusalem, and which is described in these beautiful poetic terms. The gates are made out of precious gems. The streets are paved with gold. If you've ever been in the Middle East and you've ever been in the old traditional towns, the sewers are open sewers and they run down the middle of the streets. In the old city of Jerusalem, to this day, that's true. You see it'll be a stone, kind of a stone ditch running right down the middle of the street. And it's usually full of garbage or just whatever, it's just floating along there. So it's not pleasant. It was not pleasant to get out in the streets to go anywhere. That's been true up until fairly recently. And I think it's just interesting that when John is seeing this new city, which again we're seeing a movie here. We're seeing a vision of this beautiful world after the world we are in. And he says that sewer is full of pure water, he says. Now, an ancient person would see that right away and see what that, poetically what that meant. There's not any temple in the city because we don't relate to the other world and to God and to the spiritual world that way anymore. We don't have some kind of a symbolic building or, which people have had for thousands of years. Sickness, no sickness. There's this tree, the tree of life, and it's constantly bearing fruit, and the fruit is for, he says, the healing of the nations. So this, and then finally, this beautiful idea that, and there is no night there. Ancient people, the people who first read this, night was a very fearsome time. And people throughout much of history have had to have somebody guarding them in the darkness, because darkness meant danger and possible destruction. It says, don't worry about it. In this beautiful other way of existing, there is no night. So great way to end the Bible. Great way to end class. This is our last one in this series. But I do want to say Fallon and I have been working, been talking to Tim and others about this, and we are going to have another class next semester, and we're going to follow the same format. But this time, instead of doing genres, here's what we'll call it, something like, I think this will probably be the title: Reading the New Testament in its own time. Okay. And what we'll do is, at the beginning of each class, we'll talk about some aspect of how people lived in the days of the New Testament when it was being written. And then we'll look at some passages or texts in the New Testament that are better understood by understanding that. For some examples might be, I wrote down 2 or 3. We've got enough for the whole semester, but food and eating. For example, we got that passage where Paul says, "Now is it okay to eat food that's been dedicated to idols?" You know, there are lots, and he says, when you people get together, it's not the Lord's Supper that you eat. In first grade.
Good. I like your sweatshirt.
Well, what is the context of all that? Oh, I thought the voice from heaven was liking somebody's sweatshirt. And then and another one is the family. We'll probably do this for more than one, because we want to talk about things like gender roles within the family in the biblical times, how families were organized, and how that affects many passages really in the Bible. Slavery. The whole issue about slavery, and does the Bible in fact condemn slavery, and if not, why not? And then how do the biblical writers treat slavery, which was much more pervasive in biblical times than it ever has been anywhere else historically. The government and the way people relate to the government and to law and so on. Paganism. The religion that is around the Christians and the Jews. So we'll take topics like that and we'll spend, 15 or 20 minutes talking about the context of that, and then we'll look at some passages. So that's our plan right now. We'll try to get a little more detail to you later. So appreciate everybody's faithfulness to this class. We had a really good, when you get you all and the ones I'm seeing on here, we got a pretty big crowd.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that we've had people from all age groups and all kinds of backgrounds coming into this from all sorts of points of view. And so it's been great. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I hope it's been valuable to you. And so let's go to church. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Thanks.